It's really nice to be here. Boy, it's pretty crowded here, huh? Well, they asked me to come to this wonderful little guitar extravaganza you got going on and sit and talk with you for a while and maybe talk about some of the things that I know about that you might be interested in. And so here I am. We have our moderator here, and I'm sorry I forgot to bring my band. But I do have my guitar. And nothing prepared, but there are some questions and maybe a little demonstration. I'll be happy to demonstrate some stuff. But I will be back on tour in your country, in this town, I think July 22nd? I don't know, I just get on the bus, you know? It's like, where are we today? Well, we're in Ireland today, Steve. We're in the UK today, and we're in Pittsburgh, so I'm very much looking forward to coming here and playing in July. But all right, so I guess we can get started. Let me just check this thing because we haven't had any kind of a check on this. So give me 1 second. No, I want it now, damn it. So can you hear that okay? All right, hang on. It's so professional with me, right? Okay, more of that later. Okay, let's get started, all right? Okay.
I have a list of many questions that were sent in to the Guitar Bar website. So should we start off just having a chat about some of these, go through some of these questions?
You'll have to speak slow. I'm American. I don't understand English.
Okay. The first one says, do you still get the same buzz from playing guitar that you did when you first started?
Do I still get the same buzz from playing the guitar? Well, when I plug it in wrong, I certainly do. Well, of course, you know, when I was a kid, if you love the guitar, it's something that's kind of in you from the first time you saw it, you know what I mean? And I remember the first time I saw a guitar, it felt like Christmas. You know, it was always just the greatest instrument. And I remember seeing people play it. I think I was in like 2nd grade, and I was at my school, and a friend of mine was playing it. And I thought, Jesus, he's actually playing the guitar. He has a guitar. And from that, I just fell immediately in love with it. And it's always represented to me sort of, you know, a freedom and a liberation. And no matter what I'm going through, no matter what the situation is, whether, you know, there's, you know, we all have issues in our life or whatever, you know, as you know, especially musicians. Whenever I see a guitar to this day, I feel this excitement. It's always represented to me, you know, the feeling, like, it's like every day is Christmas, you know, whenever I see that instrument. And getting to play it too, you know, it's a personal thing when you play an instrument. You get to express what you're feeling and what you're thinking, and it doesn't lie. You know, when you're playing an instrument, you have no choice but to be exactly who you are.
Okay, the next one I've got here is...
This stool doesn't go with my shoes. I'm afraid it'll have to go. All right.
You ready for the next one?
Yeah.
It says, if you had to pick one of your songs that defines your guitar career, which song would it be and why?
Aye. Next. Let me think of it. Well, that's a tough one because there's you know, you have a lot of different kind of imaginations when you're making music, and some of it's pretty aggressive. You know, I have some songs that are, I guess, like the Attitude song, which was my first record, Flexible, is kind of a seed of some bizarre ideas that have evolved through my career. But then you can take something like Call It Sleep, which was a ballad off of that record, which showed signs of, you know, potential to grow in more of a ballad type of way, a sensitive, tender kind of performance way. So it's hard to pick one song. But, yeah, next question.
This one apparently says, if you could only take one guitar to the moon, which one would it be? I don't like these questions.
One with an oxygen tank.
Okay. Where do you see your guitar start going in the next 5 years, as opposed to 4 years or 6?
Yeah. Well, see, in 4 years it will be very different than in 5 years. So I can tell you exactly 5 years, but 6 years I'm not exactly sure of. So I have no idea. No, I think, you know, it's funny. Whenever us humans try to project what things are going to be like in the future, we always miss the mark. You know, if you look back at like films from the 50s and the 60s, and the 70s, or even the 80s, we have these projections of what the future is going to be like. But inevitably, something always enters the mix that takes us by surprise. You know, the internet. I mean, how would we have suspected that long ago? And what we expect is going to happen really doesn't. It's usually very, very different than what we expect. So to try to project what is going to happen with, you know, the very narrow field of guitar playing in comparison to the cosmos, it's going to be determined by a person that comes along and just kind of marches to the beat of their own drum. You know, that's what always happens. If you look back through history at any great genre that evolved or any trend that came about, it was always a result of one genius, you know, that had no choice but to follow their convictions. And then what happens is they are so clear in their vision, and it usually doesn't have anything to do with what we expect they're going to do. I mean, like when Hendrix, for instance, started to, you know, do his thing, it was so alien to what anybody expected would happen. But look what happened. You know, he created a whole, you know, field. And you take even someone like Edward Van Halen. You know, when he came along, he really reinvented the instrument. We couldn't have expected that to happen. So from that, there was all these, you know, seeds that were planted. So as far as what's going to happen in the future, 5 years, I suspect that what's going to happen is that somebody's going to come along and do something that none of us were expecting. And I don't necessarily think it'll have a lot to do with blazing technique or maybe even the use of equipment, or it's something that we just are not aware of. And then we'll have another trend, and then that'll get watered down and tired because it'll be, you know, festooned with placators. No. Next question.
It says, how much did Frank Zappa influence your style of guitar playing and musical direction? And is there any examples that you could play for us to show the sort of thing you're talking about?
Well, oddly enough, Frank's guitar playing wasn't so much of an influence on me. but his music was, you know, because I've always was interested in hearing certain things in music. I like to hear great melody, you know, interesting lyrics, great guitar playing, and some kind of a compositional constitution. And Frank had all of these things in his music. And for me, he hit the mark in a lot of ways. His guitar playing, but I just work with different brain muscles on the guitar than Frank, you know. He actually would not play a lot of the complicated things that he would have other people play. He was more of a visceral type of a player. And I remember my audition. You're gonna love this. So Frank says to me, you know, you want to come down and audition for the band? And I said, okay. And he gave me a list of songs to learn, and obviously I got there. He didn't play any of the songs that he asked me to learn. And he was really tough. He was really very, very, he gave me a hard time. And there was a lot of people there. I remember Terry Bozzio was there and all this. And Frank comes up to me, and Frank will like pick up the guitar and say, okay, play this. And he'll play something very simple, like cryptic, you know, because he wasn't really, you know, a shredder or anything. He'll go like, you know, something, you know, and okay, but he'll say, play that, and play it like this. I'm like, okay, you know, and I play it. And meanwhile, I'm 20 years old, and I'm scared out of my brain, you know. And he says, okay, now add this note. And he adds a note, and I say, okay, you know. And then he says, and I'll play it in 7/8. So I sit there, okay. He's like, okay, now play it a reggae 7/8. I think I said, okay, and I play it, and he goes, okay, now add this note. And he plays this note, and I look at the guitar, and it's impossible. I can't do it. Because it was impossible, it just couldn't be done, you know? And he looks at me and he says, well, I hear Linda Ronstadt is looking for a guitar player. That was my audition.
What else?
He was kidding. And he let me in the band. So.
Okay, this is the most common question ever, and it just says, what advice would you give to someone starting out playing the guitar?
Get a good lawyer.
The sort of things you know, the best things to practice and the way to go about it.
Oh, I know. Well, you know, I get asked that question quite often, and it's difficult because you got to find your own way, sort of. You know, the best advice I would give somebody is try to identify with what you're interested in. You know, try to find that thing. Everybody is good at something. You know, I believe that. I believe we're all creative and we all resonate at a particular thing. Sometimes it's numbers. You know, people. Sometimes it's being creative in a particular field. It could be anything, but one of the challenges is to try to find that thing that we're really happy doing and we feel that we can do good. And it doesn't just stop with music. I mean, I went to college at Berkeley, and I met a lot of wonderful people. A lot of people, when you're young, you start out, you know you're interested in music and maybe the music business, but you're not quite sure how it's going to play out. So I met a lot of great people who started out going to music school wanting to be musicians. But you know, as their interests evolved, they discovered that they were really good at engineering or being a manager or, you know, editing. You know, there's so many fields. Some of them are less romantic than others, you know. Obviously playing a guitar in front of people or an instrument is really nice. But really, ultimately, it's finding what you're happy doing and then cultivating that. And if you do discover that you really do want to play the guitar, you see, I never discovered that I wanted to play the guitar. And I never made a choice. It was always just one thing, and that was it. You know, there was never really any point where I had to say, well, let me see, do I want to have a career in music, or do I want to do this? You know, if you find yourself at that kind of a crossroads, you really have to examine your intentions, because an artist has no choice. They can't make a choice. It's one thing or nothing, you know? And having said that, I think it's important that everybody plays an instrument of sorts, you know? It's like a birthright, you know? Whether you're banging on a drum or whatever, playing an instrument is liberation, you know? But as far as advice to a young player, if you know that you want to play the guitar, like I say, it's very good to have goals, you know? And those goals can be anything. Maybe you want to be you just want to be able to play rhythm guitar on the beach with your friends, you know? Maybe you want to be a shredder of the highest order, you know? I can tell you how to do that. Maybe you want to just be able to write music and use the guitar as a tool. Whatever it is, you got to visualize that goal. And once you got a very strong, clear picture of it, then figure out how to break it down into elements. And you slowly take each element and you accomplish it. And we do this unconsciously too, you know, but when I look back at my career, that's what I noticed I did, you know. I wanted to make a solo record, and I was very shy about it. I didn't care what the world thought, you know, but I was very interested in getting, you know, the right equipment and whatever, and I broke that down. Okay, the idea was make a solo record, you know. Then you got to break that down. It went from writing the music to buying some equipment, all the way through to, I actually started my own record company for it. This was back in 1980. And then they didn't have CDs back then. So every part of that goal had to be broken down into, okay, I have to make records. Who manufactures records? You know, so I gotta make a record company to get it in distribution. Who distributes records? And I'm very, very resourceful. You know, nothing stops me when I want to get to a goal. But I really think that, you know, that example, what I just explained, might be some constructive advice for somebody who, because the biggest question is, okay, I want to be a musician, I want to play an instrument, I want my music to be heard. How do I do that? Well, that's the goal. The way you do it may differ with technology that evolves. It may differ the country you live in. It may differ with the instrument you want to play. So I can't give you any real one piece of advice except pick a goal, figure out how to break it down.
It says here, when you're preparing for a tour, what sort of things do you practice to get your chops together?
The songs. Yeah. I make a set. Well, first, actually, it's interesting you're asking me that question right now, because I'm in the process of putting together a show right now. And it starts here. You know, I visualize a show, and just what I was saying, and I break it down. And the first thing I think is, okay, what do I want this show to have? I want it to be entertaining. I want it to be unique to the, you know, so that when people come, they're getting, you know, an experience that's enjoyable and stimulating, all these things. And okay, so what am I going to do? And then I break down the show into portions, and I start thinking how I'm going to build certain things. And the worst thing for me is to go to a show and see one thing happen through the whole show. You know, so I break down the show in my mind. So it all starts here, and then I start to construct it. As far as guitar playing goes, yeah, I work on the songs, but then I take various elements of the show, sections, and I think, what can I do that I haven't done before that's sort of bizarre but interesting? You know, I visualize sort of like this performance technique lately that's sort of like it's like a body language. It's like a body language, you know, and I'm working on trying to fuse together this body language with the mental expression, you know, the emotional expression of the sound. And it's really cool. It's hard, and it takes a lot of focus, but it's, when it happens, it's very magical. But that's kind of one of the things I'm trying to achieve for this tour. So I'll visualize it, and then I'll start working on it. But when I sit and actually practice, I take an idea and I work on it. You know, obviously, when you're on stage, you know, everything's different. You know, once the lights go out, it changes. Now, you can practice till you're blue in the face. You can work with guys, friends that you think you know, and you can get those songs very tight. But once you're on stage and the lights go out, everything changes. You know, there's a whole different set of, you know, emotional tools that take over. You know, and it's quite a test. So when I'm in that situation, I want to be prepared to be able to just play and not think about anything. But in order to get there, yeah, I got to break it down. I got to break it down. And I'll work on little technique things. You know, like I'll take an idea and I'll sit and I'll focus on it with the guitar for a while. It's sort of like a musical meditation. You know, we all kind of meditate whenever we're focusing on something. And in order to get the best results for me, I have to sit and take an idea and work on it and maybe even make an exercise out of it until weird things start happening. And you gotta stick with it. You know, you really gotta stick with it. And then once those weird things start happening, and you know, you pull the ones that you like and you put them in your little memory bank. And then what happens is when you're on that stage and you're actually playing, those things will just, you know, naturally or organically come out. But there's a lot of different things I'll work on, and I'll just give you an example of something. It took me a minute to fool around with this beatbox. You guys hear me okay? Is this going okay? You're not bored out of your mind, are you? That's my next single. I have no idea what's going to come out of this thing, but I'll find something for it. That patch is called Euro #1, so I guess it's appropriate. All right, so what I'll do, I would highly recommend investing in something like this. And this is just a little Pandora's box. And I take it around with me all the time because I can plug into it, it has some grooves, and it's good for warming up. But a lot of times I'll just sit in my studio and I'll pick a beat or a groove, and I'll just play, and I'll pick an idea. And I'll tell you what, I will talk about rhythm for a minute. Because rhythm is something that a lot of people neglect. But when I was going to Berklee College of Music, I had no idea what it meant to lock. When I say lock, I mean lock with a groove, to play in a groove. It was all about just trying to play fast and crazy. And when I got to LA and started working with Frank, I was as white as you could get, you know? I had no groove. And Frank explained it to me, and I started playing with these professional musicians, and I started to understand what it means to really lock, you know? The process of learning a piece of music, for me, has been like this. You take a piece of music, you get it under your fingers, it's a struggle. You know, sometimes you work on it, you work on it, you work on it. I break stuff down to like a bar at a time. And I work on one bar at a time. until I feel like I've got it under control. And then I'll move on to another bar, and another bar, according to what the music is, but then you link them all together. And what happens is, it'll get to it like with Frank's music, it would get to the point where I would have it under my fingers, but knowing how to play something and making it sound like a piece of music is very different. It's very easy to work on something mechanically until you got it under your fingers perfectly. But that's only the starting point. That's phase one. After that, you got to add your personality to it and make it sound like a piece of music. And in order to get to that point, the performance of something needs to be second nature. You just got to have it. Once you get it to where it's second nature, then you don't have to worry about screwing it up because you got it down. And even then, I know I screw things up all the time. But once you start adding your personality into it, then it starts to sound like a piece of music. The more that you do this, the more confident you get when you're playing. And the way people react to the way you play is a direct reflection of your confidence in what you're doing. So I didn't understand rhythm at all. And I started to play to a drum machine a lot until I started to feel what it meant to lock. So I'll just show you. I would take a groove like this. And I might do that for 2 hours or an hour without stopping until it just locked perfectly. Can we turn these monitors up just a little bit here? I just need a little more monitor here. So that's just sort of like one thing I would do, and just take an idea like this. And then I remember I started getting into these polyrhythmic things, where you have a groove like that going at one tempo, but then you add these odd time signatures on top of it. I'll give you an example. That groove goes, and I would start working on subdividing it with like bars of 5/8 and 7/8 on top of that, which would be something like 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 ta ta ta. That's 5. 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 or 7. Try to do that over 4/4 though. So you feel, you hear how that feels. It's a completely different kind of a groove, and that's for the rhythm stuff. And then you can do the same thing with soloing. You take an idea, and I would take an idea and I would just work on it and evolve it until finally I'd come up with something weird. And then that would become part of my musical vocabulary. For instance, let me see. Okay. Let's take the idea of trills, where you flutter the note. If I just sit and do nothing but that for an hour, say, obviously not right now, I'm going to come up with something that I haven't done before. It's inevitable. And so would you if you did it. And then you just work on that until you fascinate yourself with some of the weird things you're coming out with. It's like finding a little thread and kind of pulling it, knitting a sweater. And then that will work its way into your playing. So I'll just fool around a little bit with that now. stand there and solo and just do that all night, it would sound like an idiot. But there's other things. The other day I was playing around with some cool things. I'll show you this one thing. But really, like I say, it's just a matter of sitting and focusing on it for a long time. I'm just giving you a few minutes of it. But what happens, like I say, odd things start happening. I'm doing this kind of thing the other day where it involves the whammy bar. And is that for me? And then, well, I'll show you. And you can do that too. Anyway, the idea is, like I'm saying, is you sit and, my concept for that was, okay, try just using the bar and creating a melody. It's difficult at first, obviously, but then you keep working on it and working on it. You come up with things that really work and that make sense, and you work them into your playing. And by focusing on it without, letting your mind wander for like an hour, like I say, you come up with things, and then they just work their way into your playing, and they're unique, because by sitting and doing it, like if I was to just say, okay, I'm going to play these two notes for an hour, and I'm going to focus, and I'm going to only play those two notes, but I can do anything I want with them. Well, all your Chuck Berry and Jimmy Page, those riffs are going to go away pretty quick. And you're going to be forced to do things that come from you. And that's how you can develop a uniqueness on the instrument. Okay, enough of that. Next question.
Okay, we've got, when you first started playing guitar, who were your influences, and did you ever get any insults about your playing from other kids?
Any what?
Insults. about your playing from other kids, yeah.
Yes. When I was growing up, I grew up in the 70s. Well, I was a teenager in the 70s. It was a great time for music then. There was bands like, Led Zeppelin. Hendrix, of course, was a big influence. And Ritchie Blackmore, and Brian May. And all those really great rock guitar players and progressive players of the 70s, I always felt they really played, They did great stuff. I wasn't into jazz. I wasn't into classical music. I didn't really like the blues. I like it now, but back then to me it just sounded simple, and I didn't understand it. Imagine that. I understood Zappa's music, but I didn't understand the blues. Go figure. But so that was, kind of the stuff that I was listening to. Was I ever insulted? I'm probably the most criticized guitar player in the world. There was a period there, like in the 90s, where I could not open a guitar magazine and, not read hate mail about me. So, yeah, well, trends change, and when you really are a powerful entity with this, where, maybe an hour tape that would go like, and then I'd say major 7, and, it's a tritone, and, now I know every interval. I can tell you chords, how they're stacked, and all this stuff. But all of that was really so that when I hear something in my head, I know what to play. It's invaluable. It's what it's all about. And some people can do it very naturally, and some people just do what their fingers are used to doing, which is scales and riffs and stuff. And after a while, it might be fascinating, but it gets cold. Because really what we respond to is the humanity that's in what we hear. And that has to come from a person, and that has to come from what they're hearing in their head. So it's hard work to develop your ears, but it's constantly neglected. And I would recommend that it's a very valuable, vital part of the equation of becoming an expressive, emotional player.
Okay, the next one here, it says, you're often quoted as having gone through a period of practicing the guitar for between 10 to 15 hours a day. How old were you when you did this? And how did you find the time to fit it into your day? I assume there was plumbing visits. I'm sure there's plumbing visits at some point in the day.
Let me see, how old was I when I did it? 46. No, when I was younger, I used to practice a real lot. I just, not nearly as much as my kids play video games, though. Just kidding. I had school and all these other things, but I was very anal and neurotic about my practice regime. It was kind of like, I don't even know if it was very healthy. But I only wanted to play the instrument. Everything else in life for me was a distraction and a misery. I was terrible at everything else. I made a terrible boyfriend, I didn't really know how to have a relationship because everything was about the guitar. And maybe it was a form of escape, I don't know, but I really enjoyed playing it. And it was, when you can't do something and you employ your discipline and your focus, and then you can do it, you get a sense of dignity. And that activity can become addictive because playing just became an addiction. I had to feel like I was accomplishing something. And that's human nature, to have to accomplish something, right? And what we're here for, basically, it seems. So I did play a lot, and I focused a lot, but I did do other things. I went out with my friends on the weekend and caused a lot of trouble. And these days, there's a lot of other things. If you're young and you've got time, play as much as you can if you like, because later on, when reality sets in, there's all the other obligations. Your time to just sit and play can get compromised. But it's okay because, you know, I don't need to sit around and do exercises and stuff anymore. So these days, I may not play for a while, for a stretch, because I'm working on something else or whatever. But when it comes time to prepare for a tour, or if I got to play something, I do put a lot of time back in on the instrument.
And you put a lot of time in it, and it's the same as we were saying earlier. You practice just the same sort of thing as you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, but it goes into different realms. You know, it's not. Yeah.
I mean, this next one's very, very common. It says, "Hi Steve, is there a special technique that would improve the speed of my playing?" Is there a special technique that would improve the speed of my playing?
A special technique that would improve the speed? Yeah, just play faster. Move the metronome up.
I didn't write his questions. The guitar bar. How many guitar bar readers?
Actually, I can give you some good advice on that. If you want to play really fast, it's simple. Start really slow. Start really, really slow, and work on every single element of what you're doing, and think about it. The guitar is such an interesting instrument, and it's such an expressive one because every time you hit a note, it's different. Nobody can hit the same note the same way, you know? And just hitting one note, there's so many things that you can do with it. The way that you hit it here with your pick will determine a lot about tone. You know, people say tone is in the amp, tone is in your head, it's in your fingers, you know? And I could tell you another Frank Zappa story. I remember after I was good at learning all this crazy music, but I didn't really have a great tone. And I remember after the first gig I did with Frank, I was having breakfast with him the next day, and I said, "So what do you think?" You know? And he says, "Well, you know, Steve," or Sport, he used to call me Sport, "you know, Sport, you're actually a very good guitar player, but your tone sounds like an electric ham sandwich." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? I've got the Strat, I've got the Marshall," and he said, "The tone is in your head." And I remember once I was sitting in my studio, and I was recording something, I was playing, and Edward Van Halen came in, because we were friends. And we're just talking, you know, and I was recording, and I had my guitar, my amp, it sounded like me. And we're talking, and he was making a joke about something, and he wanted to demonstrate, so he picks up the guitar and he starts playing. And I'm listening, I'm going, holy shit, that's Edward Van Halen. It sounded like him. It sounded exactly like him, you know, and I'm listening and thinking, that's my amp, my guitar, but it sounds like him, because it's his fingers. And, you know, so the way that you attack a note, with its tone and everything, is going to be, the tone is determined. So, if you want to play fast, you got to start off really slow and perfect. And if you have a riff that, you know, goes a certain way, I don't know, I'm just using a stupid example. You know, I would take that and I'd make an exercise out of it, you know? And as I did it, I'd have a list of things that I wanted it to make me feel. You know, are all the notes clean? If that's what I wanted. You know, I had to work very, very hard at being even a remotely clean player because I'm tremendously reckless and sloppy. You should see my sock drawer. Has it got the tone that I want? Does it have the emotional context? Am I angry when I'm, you know, or do I want it to sound like, you know, what? I don't know, you know, so then I'll think of that, you know, and then eventually, and I'll do it with a lot of focus until it sounds just right. And it might just mean sitting there and going, okay, so I just made a little mistake, so it's like, okay. And it might just mean sitting there and going, okay, so I just made a little mistake, so it's like, okay. I'll focus on that until I, you know, gets right, and then. And if the goal is to be able to play that all over the place, then eventually, you know. say it's not perfect, but I would sit and work on it until all of that sounded perfect, and then slowly get a little faster at it, until eventually it was perfect and fast. And that takes a long time, but that's how you do it.
Okay, next one here. Is there any new piece of gear that has caught your attention recently, and will you be playing the new Ibanez German 20th anniversary guitar on tour?
Well, these glasses are a new piece of gear. They're pretty cool, don't you think? New piece of gear, new piece of gear. Yeah. I recently rehauled my entire rig. I used to have all of these pieces of outboard gear and everything, but now I use this thing called a TC, what the heck is it? TC? Yeah, it's the G system with it. It's the new one that it's just, I can't even believe this. And the guy from TC sitting in the audience going, "You idiot, Vi, get it right." It's very nice because it's a bulletproof box that has all of the, all of the parameters in it. I don't need a rack anymore. And the thing about that gear is it actually sounds good. It's difficult to find digital gear that actually sounds good. G system, it's called TCG system. Sorry. But that's pretty cool. It makes traveling easier if it's just one thing. And what was the other part of the question? Yeah. I'm so fortunate, because I have the opportunity to have these guitars made for me.
There was a few questions asking you why you went for Ibanez in the first place as well.
Well, it's simple. I was lucky because I just had joined David Lee Roth, so all of these guitar companies were interested in making a guitar for me, but they wanted me to play their guitar, and I could never really quite understand that. I went through this period where I wanted to design a guitar because I had all these interesting ideas that seemed to be, work with my eccentric type of playing. For instance, at the time they didn't have. It was kind of hard to find 24 fret, electric guitars there was no such thing as a floating tremolo system. I actually had a guitar and I took a screwdriver and a hammer and I whacked out all the wood in the back of the tailpiece so that you can pull up on it. So I thought, hey, that would be cool. If you can go down, why not be able to pull up? It had its advantages, but the disadvantages were that then the tailpiece was floating, it was harder to play in tune and all this stuff. And then just the position of the knobs, where I thought they would work best for me. And the way that the 5-position switch was actually allocated to the pickups is kind of unique. When you're in this position, it's a humbucker. And when you go to this position, it splits the coil, making this single coil, along with this being single coil. So you get that Strat kind of a sound, which I always loved, but could never find on a guitar that had humbuckers. And then in the middle position, you got a single coil pickup. And then over here, it's the same concept. This humbucker is split, so it's a single coil and a single coil, which then gives you that tubey kind of a Strat sound again. And then in this position, it's just balls out, the humbucker. And even simple things like the position of the input jack. All these guitars have them like here, and you step on them and they pull out, So I just thought, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, put it over here and you can't step on it, Then, of course, I had to do something. Well, one of the things that was unique to this instrument at the time was I have big hands, and I could never really get up high and play the notes, so I had them chop away all of this excess wood here, so now it's easier for me. And what else? Oh, of course, I had to do something completely stupid and silly, and I told them to put a monkey grip in it. And it was only because then I can hold it like this and throw it around. So that became the Jet. So I made this design, and I sent it out to a bunch of guitar companies and said, whoever makes me the best guitar, I'll play, but it has to be this one. And, hands down, Ibanez just sent me the finest instrument. and we're celebrating our 20th anniversary of this jam. And we have, I think I just saw one before, there was one here, a 20th anniversary jam. Will I be playing it on tour? I don't know, it's very heavy. What a wuss, right? I'll probably be bringing it out and playing it. It's very cool. But, you know, like I say, I'm very fortunate to have a company like Ibanez making these guitars for me. So I had to figure out ways to memorize all this music, you know? So I would sight read it or I'd play it, and I'd record it. And then I would put it on this timer, put it on a cassette, and I'd put the cassette on a timer. So it would go on in the middle of the night when I was sleeping and I had headphones on. My thought was that somehow maybe it would kind of be absorbed into my subconscious. I just woke up with funny hair. Actually, it might have worked because I learned the music before any of the other guys in the band. Yeah. But I also would take a note and have it just play. And it was like an A. And I was thinking that maybe somehow this would subconsciously become a note that I would remember. And it actually did. And it was difficult because at first, when I was a teenager, I used to play this Hendrix song, Electric Ladyland. Really beautiful song. But the first chord was A. So I would always hear that A in my head. You know, so whenever somebody said, "What note is this?" I'd say, "Oh, that's a G sharp," and they'd say, "No, it's actually, an A." And I couldn't figure it out, and then I realized Hendrix tuned down a half step. So then I went about with that, and then there was a piece of music I learned with Frank called The Black Page, and the first note was B. And I had to play that song so many times that I would just be an idiot if I couldn't remember B, you know. So that's one way to, maybe develop perfect pitch, is you have to first realize, or when you try to remember a note that you know from a song. And if you know that that's an A, then you have to employ what's called relative pitch. And relative pitch is the ability to hear a note. If you know what that note is, you know what all the others are because of the interval. And I did extensive interval training where I would memorize intervals. I had to do that, for all the transcribing I've done. But that's it. People ask me what would I say is the most important aspect of playing an instrument. And besides all of the, the emotion and all this stuff, sure, there's the development of your ear. Because your ear is the link between what you're hearing in your head and what your fingers do. And if you don't know what something is going to sound like, how can you express what you're hearing in your head? So I used to build these extensive exercises and stuff that, would help me to develop the fingers that are on my eyes, so to speak.